Hi, I'm Lori from HIS Talk. Welcome and thanks for joining us for today's webinar entitled Improving Trial Accrual by Engaging the Digital Healthcare Consumer. It's brought to you by DocuSign. I have just a few housekeeping items to make you aware of before we start the webinar. Attendee phone lines have been muted to prevent background noise. You can use GoToWebinar's questions box in the console to submit questions to our presenters at any time. You may want to familiarize yourself with that now so you'll be ready. The presenters will answer your questions during Q&A at the end. You can also use the questions box or the chat function to send questions or comments to me anytime during the webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded, so you'll receive a link to the recording as well as a PDF version of the PowerPoint presentation in a follow-up email. We have two speakers today. First up is Dr. B.J. Rimel, who is a gynecologic oncologist at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Dr. Rimel is also the Associate Director of Gynecologic Oncology Clinical Trials in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology there. Her research interests focus on determining the best ways to connect women to research in her field. Joining Dr. Rimel will be Jennifer Royer. Jennifer leads Healthcare and Life Sciences Product Marketing at DocuSign as part of DocuSign's Industries and Departmental Solutions Group. She manages marketing strategy for these areas, including industry product launches, partnerships, and conferences. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Rimel.
Thank you, Lori. So again, I'm Dr. B.J. Rimel. I'm a gynecologic oncologist. I specialize in women's cancers, particularly the ones below the belly button. And I'm going to talk to you today about our research project. The title of our presentation is the Breakthrough Research in the Digital Consumer, Achieving Results to the Online Consent. So a little bit about where we are located. We're at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. This was founded in 1902, and Cedars-Sinai has now become the largest nonprofit hospital in the western United States. We're located basically in Beverly Hills proper. We have about 2,000 physicians in nearly all specialties and over 10,000 employees and 2,000 volunteers. I work in the Women's Cancer Program, which was established by Dr. Beth Carlin in 2002, and this is designed to focus specifically on how cancers impact women, not only cancers unique to their gender, but also cancers that particularly affect women in a different mechanism, such as lung cancers. We also focus on providing to our patients clinical therapeutic trials or the study of new and experimental therapies, early detection and screening studies, hereditary cancer programs focusing on the BRCA gene mutations, and other laboratory-based studies to help us in our quest to end cancer as a threat to women. So as most people know, clinical therapeutic trial accrual in cancer is the gold standard for testing new cancer therapies and treatments and for all methods of cancer prevention. Unfortunately, in the United States, current data suggests that only 2 to 4% of adult cancer patients actually are able to participate in a clinical trial. And a recent study by Galsky et al. Showed that 40% of cancer clinical trials were closed early due to low accrual. This low rate of accrual and participation significantly influences the statistical power of the trials and results in the inability to answer the question for which the trial was designed, sometimes leading a drug that could have gone to market out of that window or not being able to answer a question that's incredibly relevant to patients. There are a lot of barriers to clinical trial enrollment, both physician-related barriers and patient-related barriers, and I've listed several of them here. The ones that we noticed here that were a particular problem at our institution were participants' absence of knowledge about clinical trials and difficulty with informed consent. For physician-related barriers, the lack of time and difficulty with knowing what studies were open and when they're open and who's eligible also plays a large role in the physician's ability to recommend studies to patients. There are a lot of clinical trial accrual methods that have been studied, but there are no controlled studies of methods identifying potential subjects and improving accrual. Registry recruitment has been used very successfully in large epidemiologic studies of women, specifically in Illinois, Iowa, and Kentucky. And back in the dark ages of 1996, Macy's et al., who's one of the fathers of bioinformatics, suggested that the use of the internet might actually improve clinical trial promotion, but at that time felt that it was not appropriate for every trial. Here at Cedars-Sinai, recognizing that we had similar problems to our national colleagues in accruing patients, there was a goal to develop a registry to help link women to research studies. This began as a traditional paper-based registry in 2010 and was implemented at several sites across the institution. Recruitment was performed by physicians, nurses, and registration staff, and mostly by registration staff. Consent was usually face-to-face, and it took about 15 minutes, or participants could be given consent to fill it on their own, and they would fill out the questionnaire and send it back. This consent was quite long, totaling 13 pages, and required a significant amount of paper and consent and data time. We recognized that this paper-based registry was really not a feasible solution for improving clinical trial accrual, and that recruitment to the registry was still remarkably poor. We also wanted an innovative solution that would help us to identify patients without cancer who may not be coming into the cancer center or the breast center. We wanted to recruit and consent with minimal staff time, and we wanted to integrate social marketing, as recognizing that a large proportion of our population is using the internet to access both information about our medical center, about the physicians that they see, and the treatments that they may want to try. We also wanted to implement an online solution that would remain adherent to the 21 CFR Part 11 compliance for electronic records and electronic signatures. As I mentioned, the internet and social marketing is really an area where we expect a lot of our participants to access medical knowledge or information about the medical center. And the average gynecologic cancer patient encompasses the full scope of people represented in this graph. We recognize that by using an online patient-facing portal, we can increase our pool of candidates by appealing to women who are outside of Cedars-Sinai. And so in March of 2013, we transitioned our paper-based registry to an online registry, which we called Research for Her. We promoted this registry through blogs, social media, and other traditional media outlets to funnel participants to our website that is still part of the Cedars-Sinai main site. From the website, then the patients enter a DocuSign portal to complete an online consent and a questionnaire that's linked to that consent. We use the DocuSign portal to allow patients to first complete what looks like their paper consent, but it's much shorter, and then a questionnaire that uses several drop-down menus and fill in the blanks. This is the workflow. Basically, participants learn about Research for Her from online awareness. We found that click-to-click marketing is really a better method for us. All the paper we printed to tell people to go to our website was really ineffective. But basically, they figure out about the website, they initiate the consent by clicking on the Click Here to Join button. The website opens what's called a DocuSign envelope, which is the process by which the participant is given an email validation code to get the envelope opened and be unique for them. Then they go on to complete the enrollment by signing the consent and the questionnaire. So I'm going to demo now our Research for Her website. This is the Research for Her website, which I think you all can see here. This is, again, part of our Cedars-Sinai main web pages. The participants can look at this information and then click here to join the registry. I'm going to demonstrate that. So I click here, and this is the first page that we receive. I have to attest that I'm 18 and a woman, and I'm promising you that I am, even though you can't see me. I'm going to type my name in here and my email, and go on and begin registering. So what's going to happen next is that it's going to tell me that I need my access code. This is allowing us to perform an email validation step that keeps us in compliance with those 21 CFR Part 11 compliance I was talking about, because we're not doing an in-person consent. So I go to my email, and it will come. Let's see. If I refresh it, maybe it will do it again. Yay, here we go. Okay, so I open this, and it gives me a note that this is from Research for Her, that I recently visited the site, and this is my access code. So now I have to copy this access code. It says copy the code, click on the box below to go to the validation screen. So I click on this link here, and then I can go to the access code and paste it in, and I can validate. If a person feels like they didn't get the access code, we can coach them through that process. Once I validate that I am who I say I am, this opens the DocuSign portal and gives me access to the consent and questionnaire documents. So the next thing that I do is I say I'd like to review the documents. These are the consent documents, and basically it's exactly what you think of for a registry consent. We're asking participants that to give us permission to use the information they give to us, either through the questionnaire or through their participant record, if the patient is a patient at Cedars-Sinai. Obviously, for non-Cedars-Sinai patients, we don't have access to their medical records. We then have radio buttons that give us the required assurances. So I test that I am 18, that I am a female, that I have read and understand that I'm granting permission for the team to use my medical records if I'm a Cedars patient, and that these records can be stored, that they will be kept as confidential as is humanly possible, and I agree that I will participate in the research data. And then I click here on this sign button, and I can adopt and sign just like any other DocuSign document. This completes the electronic signature requirements and says, you are almost finished. And the really important part for me as a participant and as a researcher is to make sure that participants go on to complete the rest of this questionnaire. This questionnaire has about 23 data points that include things like gravity, parity, history of hormone replacement therapy, history of prior surgeries, history of prior cancers, family history, certain genetic screening tests that they may have completed, or other disease sites that we are working with to obtain information for the patient to be linked to eligible clinical trials. Once I've completed the questionnaire, I will initial here. I'm not going to complete it. But we click on the yellow button that says complete my registration. And then it says, thank you for joining the registry. The patient, the participant is then emailed a copy of their consent, which is the completion of that electronic consent compliance. So I'm now going to go back to my PowerPoint. So what did we really learn from implementing the DocuSign portal and online consent in contrast to the paper consent? Well, we had an immediate increase in the rate of enrollment. We also noticed a marked shift in demographics that improved our ability to reach certain populations, especially participants who are non-white, who are younger, and who do not have cancer. We've also been able to use this program to successfully link our registry participants with active research studies, and using web-based promotion and social marketing is really the way that we've been able to guide people to the enrollment website. This is a demonstration of the increase in recruitment. So the paper registry recruited about 5.4 people a month. The online registry, we recruit about 23 people a month. The participant demographics, as I mentioned, have changed fairly dramatically. We recruit a lot more people outside of Cedars-Sinai, approximately 40%. We have about 25% of participants identifying as non-Caucasian, and we are recruiting a much younger population, with 50% of our participants now being under 50. We've been able to increase the linkage to clinical trials to 13.6%. If you remember from the beginning of the slideshow, the average rate of accrual is about 2 to 4% in the United States. So 13.6%, although not an amazing number, is actually a huge improvement for us. As of April of this year, there were 44 linkages from the participants who consented online, meaning that of the women who consented to the registry, which is about 263 people at that time, 44% of them went on, or pardon me, 44 individuals went on to participate in another study. The cost per each linkage to a clinical study was about $84, but as we've, even in the last few months, we've had a continuing increase in linkages, and that cost has gone way down. And the schematic on the left-hand side gives you an example of some of the kinds of studies that we've been able to recruit to. These are primarily hereditary cancer studies, novel screening studies for ovarian cancer, inflammatory bowel disease studies, biomedical imaging studies looking at novel ways to image, and other biorepository protocols, which are when patients or participants are having a surgery and would like to donate leftover tissue. I think it's interesting to note that we were not able to connect any of our registry participants to date to a clinical therapeutics trial for cancer, which is kind of the holy grail for us, the opportunity to get patients on a active drug study, and we've learned some things that we think that will help us in the future to make this happen. We have been able to get a participant from the registry all the way through to a survivorship protocol. That's actually a lifestyle intervention, but it doesn't count as a therapeutic study because there's no drug being involved. As I mentioned, the increase in consents really does link up with online advertising or click-to-click. So anytime anybody posts for us on such as the Stand Up to Cancer page, or we blast a group of participants who are really interested in cancer, like our Run for Her participants, or at a big Run for Ovarian Cancer event, we get a lot more uptick in our consents. So what are the things we didn't expect? We were really surprised at how much conversion from paper to online has improved the overall cost of our program. We were also very honored to receive an award for best practices in human subjects protection from the Health Improvement Institute in 2013 for our novel use of an online consent. We also noted that when we evaluated our metrics, that a lot of participants opened that envelope that I showed you, that DocuSign envelope, about 2.2 times for every time they consented, suggesting that either the participants are having some problem linking back to their original envelope, or maybe we're reading it, leaving it, and coming back at another time to complete the consent. We did notice several dropouts in the multiple steps to the consent process, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. We did notice, as I mentioned, a really great return on our investment. We were able to reduce our staff time fairly dramatically, and we're able to consent a lot more participants with a much shorter time, improving our turnaround time by 75%. This is the analysis of the dropout that I mentioned. So in just the first year of implementation, we noticed about 2,000 website hits, but only 306 people actually completed the consent process. That's the bright purple bar on the right-hand side. That's in contrast to almost twice as many actually clicking the button that says, I would like to join, suggesting that they really would have liked to participate, and we wonder why that may be the case. So we held a focus group in January to discuss the drop-off. So we used consented participants, and what they told us was that they were a little bit confused by toggling between windows to obtain an access code, especially on a mobile device. They wanted to have the language adjusted on the website so that they understood a little bit more about what was required of them sooner in the process before just getting to the consent. And they suggested the use of a video to better describe the process. So our next steps right now are to expand our website information and include these educational videos. We're also adjusting the consent process to make it a little easier for less savvy users, especially people who are not approaching this from a desktop or laptop, but are approaching this from a mobile device. We're also adjusting our questionnaire to facilitate quicker completion and transition to annual updates. Now that the registry has been open for 20 months, we have recognized that people's information has changed over time, and so what they may have been eligible for last year, they may not be eligible for this year due to a change in their own health status. And we're working on developing a process where we can ask people to update their information. We're also expanding our use of this DocuSign platform with other research protocols, such as our biorepository and other national studies. I'd like to give you a little bit of a description of what those are. So our biorepository is our system by which participants who would like to, who are undergoing surgery either for a cancer or a benign condition, can donate leftover tissue to researchers. It does require consent, however, because all of that research may be genetic or proteomic and will also include some aspect of the participant's medical record. And so this concept is introduced in the clinic by the physician. The physician then clicks a checklist that has the main attestations in the consent, explaining the main parts of the study and what kind of data will be retained. Once the physician signs the checklist, they then DocuSign that checklist to confirm their understanding. They then send that consent then, which is now only 4 pages online, is sent to the participant, who can then read it at home or do it in pre-op or do it in clinic, all on a mobile device, on an iPad. The participant then signs, the patient signs, and then the confirmation of that signature is then sent automatically to our own medical record, to the patient's email, and to a copy to the research staff as well. That satisfies all of our compliance needs. We have another study that's using the DocuSign portal, and it works really well because this is actually a national study by one of my colleagues, Dr. Alana Cass. Dr. Cass is studying cognitive function in women who have undergone a risk-reducing removal of their tubes and ovaries. This study requires identifying women who are about to undergo this procedure to have them do a few questionnaires before and after their procedure to evaluate cognitive function differences that may occur. The participants learn about the study through online web advertising, and then they call to discuss in person or on the phone whether or not they'd like to participate. Once that interview is completed, the interviewer ensures that the participant meets the criteria and the patient verbally consents to participate, and they have to have an email address. Then the investigator is able to send them by email the DocuSign portal that allows them to view the consent, sign the consent, and complete the questionnaires. And again, the questionnaire and the consent documents are sent to the research staff and to the participant, satisfying all compliance. So I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about our project. I would like to mention that all of our research has been completely supported by the Women's Cancer Program, our DocuSign partners, and our Office of Research Compliance. And if you have any questions or would like to contact us, this is our information. Jenny Lester is my partner in crime and knows all about this. So I'm going to hand the presentation over to Jennifer Royer.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Rimel. And we really are delighted to have Cedars-Sinai as one of our favorite customers here at DocuSign. And I would encourage you all, if you are female and over 18, to visit the Research for Her website and sign up for the registry. Seen great traction, as you could see in Dr. Rimel's presentation, and it's really some pretty amazing research that they're doing over there. So what I would like to do for this final few minutes of the presentation is just take a step back and hit on some of the key challenges that we're hearing about in the healthcare industry, and thinking about beyond the realm of clinical trial registry and therapeutic clinical trials and research, how else you might be thinking about digital best practices in your healthcare organization. So I'll hit on some of these themes along the lines of compliance, mobility, and operational excellence. So first, just want to share, when we think about the healthcare industry and when we're speaking with our customers, we're really hearing 3 key challenges. The first is around compliance, which we know is crucial in this space, and typically it's around HIPAA compliance, safeguarding that patient data, as well as 21 CFR Part 11, which you heard Dr. Rimel allude to earlier. Certainly that's critical for any clinical trials and research. And the second is around transforming care delivery. So this is really about meeting the needs of the end consumer, the patient. This is all what we're here for in the healthcare industry. And so, there are a lot of new programs, technologies, and industry collaboration that are really changing the way that critical care is provided today. And then lastly, I think you've all probably witnessed the consumerization of healthcare, which is essentially that consumers, or patients rather, are really expecting the same level of connectivity, of on-demand mobile services and transparency in information and data in the healthcare space as they do when they're, say, shopping for something on Amazon. So really the broader ecosystem and the world that we live in beyond a doctor's office or a hospital visit is really shaping people's perceptions and expectations of care in a healthcare setting. So it's a very exciting time in healthcare, and thinking about, well, how do we tie those challenges to perhaps opportunities for impact in improving business processes for you and your healthcare organizations. So that's where DocuSign and digital transaction management is really focused on improving these processes and addressing these challenges. So ultimately, when we're thinking about transforming care, improving compliance, meeting the needs of that mobile on-demand patient, a lot of that can be done by eliminating paper and inefficiencies in business processes. So essentially what we're here to help you do is spend less time with paper and more time with patients. And so that's what you're looking at right here is our chief enemy, paper. And what we're finding is just technology is evolving at light speed, and care and connectivity should be at a patient and physician's fingertips, but oftentimes you're still dealing with these archaic paper manual processes, everything from patient onboarding with the clipboards to provider agreements or business associate agreements. The list goes on, and this extends also into the realm of clinical research and trials. There's still many places where printing, scanning, faxing, and just overall inefficiencies in the system are preventing better care and keeping you from spending more time doing the critical research and treating patients. So it's just another way of kind of looking at the problem and how it can be addressed with digital business. And this is just another quick view of it. I mean, essentially, it's a mess out there, so you're trying to connect patients, physicians, researchers, payers, all of these critical stakeholders with critical systems and business processes. And somewhere in the middle, things are broken. So it's going in one system and out the other, from email to printing, and oftentimes kind of at the end point of a transaction when it comes to completing a form or getting a signature, it reverts to paper manual processes. And so the opportunity with technology like DocuSign and digital transaction management is to have a simple end-to-end digital process so that you're really meeting the needs of those on-demand patients, physicians, researchers, and so forth around the globe. And you're able to, whether it's on an iPad or an Android device, complete a transaction anytime, anywhere, any device, and really allowing you to focus on your most critical stakeholders and business processes because you're not caught up in this mess of transactions. And this is just, want to give a quick overview of the DocuSign DTM platform. This picture can look a little bit overwhelming, but what I want to just hit on is the fact that there are really a wide range of capabilities, and we're able to integrate into patient portals. We have an open API, both REST and SOAP for the more technical folks in the group, so able to really customize workflows and digital business processes to fit the needs of your organization. And all of this lies on a foundation of trust, security, and continuous availability. So we're an always-on system to complete transactions. And then when we think about the potential impact, I know I really like numbers, so wanted to share the digital difference with you. These are some statistics from DocuSign. So over 51% of documents that are sent through our platform are completed within an hour. over 80% within a day. And so when you think about how long it might be taking for you to get a BAA signed or a provider agreement or even a supplier contract, oftentimes when that's done with paper or FedEx or what have you, I would wager that the statistics are not that good, and we've seen that in our install base. There are some pretty dramatic cost and time savings, which ultimately translates into greater productivity and focus on patients for you. And then this other statistic, $28 saved per document, this is an average across all use cases and industries. It's something that we had a value engineering firm look into, and this number it'll range depending on the use case and your specific processes. So we've seen this go all the way up to $80 or more per document. Like I said, it really just depends. But these are just some of the hard numbers to help you understand some of what's possible in terms of impact. So also wanted to just then share, when you think about, okay, great, so we can save time and money, but what are some of the use cases? How else might I apply this in my healthcare organization? So you heard a great example from Dr. Rimel on the use of DocuSign to power the clinical trial registry there for women's cancer research and some other areas at Cedars-Sinai. Great example. And then there are some broader areas in healthcare, and this is really just scratching the surface, but everything from eliminating clipboards with patient onboarding, transition of care documents, or even just when a new patient walks in the door, signing off on the notice of privacy practices. These are all use cases that we're seeing a lot of opportunity and traction with in healthcare. And then more on kind of the business-to-business or hospital-to-provider side, provider agreements are a big one, and supplier contracts as well. So a lot of volume and value in those transactions. We've highlighted a few customer examples on the side. I'll just call out one that's another one of my favorites, which is Greenfield Health. Some pretty dramatic time savings that they have experienced. So they are using DocuSign for patient onboarding and consent forms. And prior to implementing digital transaction management, they were spending about 8 hours for the patient intake process. So when you think about all of the data that a patient is filling out on those clipboards and then having the receptionist enter that into the system. So all of that was taking 8 hours, and now it's down to 30 minutes. And the other kind of beauty of a digital system and digital forms is that they're able to ensure that all the patient data is legible because they're doing it, typing versus perhaps chicken scratch, and they're able to eliminate errors. So no one has to refill the form or anything like that. It's all controlled through the platform. And what sits behind our technology, I alluded to this earlier, is the trust and connectivity and security. This is so important in healthcare and life sciences and many other regulated industries. As a digital transaction management provider, we hold ourselves to a very high standard. We call that the XDTM standard, and you can see some of the certifications and regulatory compliance that we adhere to. So I mentioned 21 CFR Part 11 and HIPAA, which is certainly relevant here. More broadly, from a technology standpoint, ISO 27001, SSAE 16, and some of these others. Just wanted to highlight that that is something that we take very seriously. This is of paramount importance in your industry. It's something that we would encourage anyone adopting a digital technology like DocuSign to look for when you're investing in these technologies. And just a few more, a little more information on HIPAA compliance. So this is really about safeguarding your PHI. We ensure a fully traceable audit trail, full document encryption. I mentioned some of the other security standards. And DocuSign does sign business associate agreements. and you can DocuSign them, as I mentioned earlier. So that was really what I wanted to highlight, just to give you a little more of a flavor of some of the challenges we're seeing in the industry and how you might think about adopting digital transaction management in your business. So what I'd like to do now is turn it back over to Lori for Q&A.
Thanks, Jennifer. Now we'd like to open it up to the audience for questions. As a reminder, please use the questions section on the GoToWebinar panel to submit your questions to our presenters. Our first question is for Dr. Rimel. Was your institutional review board initially receptive to adopting online consenting? And if not, how did you influence them?
So I would say that our institutional review board was, like many reasonable institutions, a little bit reticent to adopt this at first. However, we worked very closely with them in discussing what the compliance requirements would be and what the IRB's vision for completion of those requirements would be before embarking on the development of our website and before choosing DocuSign as a platform. And after some initial discussions with them, we decided, what we felt like was right for our institution, and we came up with DocuSign as a good choice for us. And that, so it took a lot of personal interaction with our IRB review board, but they are very reasonable people and wanted to sort of see it in action and see what the requirements would be. But once they did, they understood that it was compliant.
Thank you. This one looks like it's for Jennifer. Can I integrate DocuSign into my existing EHR system?
Great question. This is one that we get a lot, as you might imagine, with meaningful use requirements. So the answer is yes. DocuSign, as I mentioned earlier, offers an open API, so that can be used to integrate DocuSign into almost any app, website, or system like patient portals, clinical research hubs, and patient forms that might be on your website. What I will caveat is that most EHR systems are closed-loop systems. So what that means is that DocuSign requires permission from those systems to access the APIs in order to integrate into them. So I would encourage you, if this is something that you're interested in, our solutions engineers and professional services team can help your organization better understand what the requirements are to meet your digital transaction needs and whatever use cases you might be thinking about adopting to help you get started with that integration or those use cases that you're interested in.
Great. Dr. Rimel, did your IT department have any data security concerns with an outside entity performing this transaction? And if so, how were these addressed?
They did not have those concerns. The DocuSign firewall was sufficient for their requirements, and they interacted directly with our DocuSign representatives to ensure that the compliance met their requirements.
Jennifer, how do I confirm the identity of the person completing a digital transaction?
Another great question. So the most basic form of authentication or confirming a signer's identity is their email. So you would assume that this person only has access to their email. When you're in the DocuSign console, and this wasn't part of the demo, but when you're setting something out, if you were to send a document to someone, you would just enter their name and their email. So that is the most basic form of authentication. But what you saw in Dr. Rimel's demo is another layer that you can add with that unique access code. So that's one other way that you can authenticate. There are a number of different add-ons that you can use, such as SMS text, phone access code, identity or knowledge-based authentication. And we also integrate with digital certificate providers like OpenTrust, which is more prominent in France and the EU, as well as the Safe Biopharma digital certificate for those who might require an additional digital cert credential.
Thank you. Along that same line, Dr. Rimel, have participants had any concerns with data security?
Remarkably, they have not, which I always find a little surprising. But we actually do a lot of in-person consent on a mobile device now, which I didn't have time to mention today. But in doing that, I actually get to interact with the participant, and we fill the online questionnaire and the consent form out in person. And surprisingly, that's not one of the areas that people are concerned about.
Thank you. How does archiving work? Do I have 24/7 access forever? Do I need to download anything on a regular basis?
I'll take that one. So you do have access to all of the documents. When you go into the DocuSign console, you're able to see any document that was completed as well as those that are waiting for signature. And so that is continuously available with DocuSign. Now there are more options for document retrieval if it's something that you require to be integrated with a system that keeps documents on premise on your servers. That's something that's a separate discussion that we would need to have with you, because everything with DocuSign is stored securely in the cloud. But there are other options available. We integrate with a number of those systems. So again, that's something that our team could help you figure out to best meet your needs.
Thanks. Dr. Rimel, what specifically were you able to implement after the focus group to make the sign-up process easier for participants?
So specifically, we were able to change the web page format so that initially our original website design included very little information about what kinds of studies participants might match to, and very little data about how the records would be maintained, if the patient medical record would be used. And we've included that now in the text on the website, which we believe to be a significant improvement.
Great, thank you. Jennifer, this looks like it's for you. How long does it take to set up DocuSign, and what kind of training do you provide for new DocuSign customers?
Great. So DocuSign takes only a few minutes to set up. Really, we're a SaaS company, software as a service, which means that you can get up and running very quickly and easily. And I'd also encourage you, if you want to explore the technology a little bit more on your own, to demo DocuSign from our website so you can get more of a flavor of how it works. Beyond that, if you're doing, I mentioned like an integration with a patient portal or something of that nature, it may take a little bit longer because we'd be engaging likely our professional services team or your internal IT group to make sure that we have that connectivity with those systems. So it depends, but it could be a few minutes or it could be a few weeks. I would also say, just in terms of broader training and enablement, there's a wealth of resources in support videos, FAQs, and a self-serve support community forum on our website to help you get started. For those that might want more assistance or an in-person training, we have professional services. We have what we call DocuSign University for both online and in-person trainings, and what we call customer success architects, or CSAs, that can help you scope out other use cases or ways you might want to implement digital transaction management throughout your organization.
Okay, and finally, Jennifer, what are some other examples of DocuSign use cases and customers in healthcare?
Sure. So I mentioned some of the key use cases. I'll recap on those: patient onboarding, provider agreements, and some others are physician credentialing, patient consent forms. There's really quite the range in the healthcare space. And then if we think about extending into the realm of clinical trials and research, we're also used to enroll patients into clinical trials, sign off on research protocols and SOPs, and validate investigators. So again, just a sampling there, but there's really a wide range of possibilities. It's essentially anywhere that you're using paper today or other manual processes, you could be using DocuSign. And then just some of our notable customers beyond Cedars-Sinai that I'll mention: Integris Health, UC San Francisco, Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then we also have the top 2 healthcare staffing companies in the U.S. and healthcare technology providers like Allscripts and NextGen are all part of the Docu family.
Great, thank you. That was our last question, so with that we'll conclude our webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Dr. Rimel and Jennifer, for an informative and interesting presentation. Attendees, watch your email for links to the recording of today's webinar as well as the PDF version of the PowerPoint presentation. We look forward to seeing you at our next HIS Talk webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.